Christine says, what specific examples of vows or oaths do you think Numbers 30 was referring to? Thanks for your ministry. All right, let's look at Numbers 30, and we will read them. Then Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of the sons of Israel, saying, this is the word which the Lord has commanded. If a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to bind himself with a binding obligation, he shall not violate his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. Also, if a woman makes a vow to the Lord and binds herself by an obligation in her father's house in her youth, and her father hears her vow and her obligation by which she has bound herself, and her father says nothing to her, then all her vows shall stand, and every obligation by which she has bound herself shall stand. But if her father should forbid her on the day he hears of it, none of her vows or obligations by which she has bound herself shall stand, and the Lord will forgive her because her father had forbidden her. She's under the authority of her home, and so it's a protection for minors is what this is. We have laws. It'll sound strange to modern ears because they'll think of it as sexist, but this is a protection for minors so that they won't be able to over obligate themselves to things, making a rash vow as a young person, and that's what young people do sometimes. But we could go on and talk about the marriage issues here, but you're asking about what the nature of the vows are. One second. Sorry, I just had to clear my throat. So the nature of the vows, it's super vague, and I think it's meant to be vague in Numbers 30. It's a vow to the Lord. That's a very vague thing, right? Just a vow, whatever vow you've committed. So it's in other words, a promise that is made religiously. I promise before God, and I bind myself with an obligation. I'm going to do this. Here's my vow to the Lord that it's like saying I swear to God. Right? I'm swear, not cursing here, but swear like an oath. I give an oath to God that I will do A, B, and C. And God is setting up in Numbers 30 the principle of you don't go back on your word. When you make a vow and you bring God's name into it, you do not go back on your word. Now, Jesus was confronting this situation of how some people try to get around this. God's obviously concerned with people just being people of their word. When you say it, you do it. And if you bring my name into it, you are bound. Now, with Jesus, he comes into a scenario where they're trying to find ways around this, right? Wiggle room around it. And so they'll go, oh, well, if you make an oath by the name of God, well, versus say, maybe you make an oath by the altar, or maybe you make an oath by the sacrifice on the altar. And they're trying to find different ways of making the oath to make it less binding so they can find basically loopholes to get around some of it. And Jesus responds to this by saying, hey, let your yes be yes and let your no be no. Don't play these vow games where you're like, well, I didn't technically promise by the highest thing, so I don't have to. Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. So the legal thing is about honoring the name of God and being people who do what they say. The new covenant issue is just being people who do what they say, right? It's not just about it being under the law, but just being a person who fulfills their vows. You do what you say. People can trust you. And I've learned that the more honest you are in life, the more people don't need you to make a vow. When you're a really honest person, you don't have to say, I promise, I promise, I promise. It's more often dishonest people who have to say, I promise, because they have to kind of find a way of signaling to their friends and family, this time I'll keep my word to you. I double promise, right? I promise, I swear I'll do it. I swear to God I'll do it. And they have to say these things because they've earned the distrust of those around them. So Jesus wants us to be people of integrity. When you say, I'll be there, you'll be there. That they can trust you on that. Obviously, there's an earthquake and your car gets swallowed by the earth. I think people understand that. But it's about being people of your word.